Arsenal summer is coming and it might be the most exciting one yet. Let us be honest with each other for a second. Have you ever woken up on a random Thursday morning, opened your phone and suddenly felt your heart beat a little faster because of Arsenal news? That feeling where you are not even fully awake yet, but you are already locked in, reading every word, refreshing every update, desperately hoping the rumour is real this time. Well, that is exactly the kind of Thursday we are having right now, because in the last 48 hours, two stories have dropped around Arsenal that have completely taken over the conversation. One is about a striker that could genuinely change everything for Mikel Arteta's squad. The other is about a quiet but important change happening behind the scenes at the club. Both stories matter. Both stories are worth your time. And by the end of this post, you are going to have a very clear picture of what is happening, why it matters, and what it could mean for Arsenal going forward. So grab your tea, sit down, and let us get into it. The striker question that has been hanging over Arsenal all season. Before we even talk about Julian Alvarez, let us talk about the problem Arsenal have been trying to solve. Every Arsenal fan who has watched this season honestly knows that the striker position has been a concern. Victor Gyökeres came in last summer from Sporting CP with a massive reputation. His numbers in Portugal were incredible. Goals, assists, pace, power, the whole package. Everyone was excited. Arteta was excited. The fans were excited. But then the Premier League happened. And in 42 appearances this season, Gyökeres has scored just 16 goals and contributed 2 assists. Now, on paper, 16 goals is not nothing. For some players, that would be a solid season. But when you are the main striker for a club like Arsenal, a club pushing to be the best in England and competing across Europe, 16 goals from your centre forward is not going to cut it. Compare that to what he was doing in Portugal, where he was practically unstoppable. And you can see why people are worried. The step up in quality in the Premier League has clearly affected him. The games are faster, the defenders are smarter, the space is smaller, and Gyökeres has not found the answers yet. So the question that the Arsenal board has been quietly asking themselves is this: do we wait for Gyökeres to figure it out, or do we go and find someone who is already proven at the highest level? Based on the latest reports, it looks very much like they have made their decision, and the name they have settled on is Julian Alvarez. Who exactly is Julian Alvarez, and why is everyone talking about him? If you follow football at all, you already know this name. But let us make sure everyone is on the same page. Julian Alvarez is an Argentine striker. He is 24 years old. He won the World Cup with Argentina in 2022, where he was one of the best players in the entire tournament. He scored 4 goals in that World Cup and was absolutely electric throughout. After the World Cup, he was at Manchester City, where he won trophies and played a supporting role to Erling Haaland. He was good at City, but never really got the chance to be the main man because Haaland was there taking most of the goals and most of the attention. So in the summer of 2024, Atletico Madrid came in and signed him for 95 million euros. And at Atletico, with more freedom and more responsibility, Alvarez has been brilliant. In 98 appearances for the club, he has scored 45 goals and added 15 assists. Think about that for a moment. 45 goals in 98 games is exceptional. It means he is scoring nearly 1 goal every 2 games, which at the level of La Liga and the Champions League is seriously impressive. He is not just a scorer either. He works hard, he presses, he creates, he links play. He is exactly the kind of centre forward that a manager like Arteta would love to build around. So why would Atletico ever sell him? That is the interesting part of this story. How Arsenal got into this race and why they might actually win it. The answer to why Atletico might sell Alvarez starts with money, a very large amount of money. According to reports, Arsenal made an initial offer of around 120 million euros for Alvarez. Atletico said no. But now the fee being discussed has risen to as high as 150 million euros. That is not just a lot of money. That is one of the biggest transfer fees in the history of football. If Arsenal pay that, it would shatter their current record. Right now, their biggest transfer ever is the 105 million pounds they paid West Ham for Declan Rice back in 2023. And Rice has been absolutely worth every penny of that. So you understand why the club is willing to go big again when they believe in a player. But how did Arsenal even get into this race, and why are they suddenly the front runners? This is where the story gets really interesting, and it comes down to one man. His name is Andrea Berta. He is Arsenal's sporting director, and he is the key to this whole deal. Berta spent 12 years working at Atletico Madrid before joining Arsenal in March 2025. And here is the thing, it was actually Berta himself who negotiated Alvarez's move from Manchester City to Atletico back in 2024. He knows the player. He knows the player's agent, a man called Fernando Hidalgo. He has those relationships, and in football, relationships are everything. When Atletico see Berta across the table in transfer negotiations, they are not dealing with a stranger. They are dealing with someone who was part of their family for over a decade. That matters enormously in how these conversations go. So when you wonder how Arsenal moved from being outsiders to suddenly being the favourites for Alvarez, a huge part of the answer is Andrea Berta. What about Barcelona? Were they not in this race too? Yes, and this part of the story is actually very important to understand. For a long time during the winter, reports were saying that Alvarez himself preferred a move to Barcelona. He plays alongside many of his Barcelona club teammates in the Argentina national team. He knows those guys. The idea of joining them in Barcelona made sense, but Barcelona have a serious problem right now, and that problem is money. The Spanish football authorities have strict financial rules, and Barcelona have been struggling to stay within them for a while. Their spending has been limited. Their ability to register expensive new players has been complicated. The whole situation is a mess that they are slowly trying to fix, but it takes time. And on top of that, Atletico have reportedly made it very clear that they will not sell Alvarez to Barcelona. Full stop. They are direct rivals in La Liga. Selling your star striker to the team fighting you for the title would be almost unthinkable. So that door is closed, which means that the preference Alvarez had for Barcelona is now irrelevant, because Barcelona simply cannot make it happen right now. And here is what has changed in the last few weeks. Reports from Spain in late March are now saying that Alvarez has essentially decided he wants to go to Arsenal, not reluctantly, not as a backup plan, but genuinely. He is said to view London as an exciting sporting environment. He is apparently impressed by how Arsenal operate and by the vision Arteta has for the club. Earlier in the year, journalist Ruben Uria had reported that Alvarez had no interest in returning to the Premier League. That was as recently as February. But now, less than 6 weeks later, the situation has completely turned around. The player's position has changed. Arsenal are no longer just a club he is considering. They are apparently his chosen destination. Is that not remarkable? 6 weeks ago, this felt like a pipe dream. Now it feels very real. What does this mean for Gabriel Jesus and the squad overall? There is another piece of this puzzle that is worth discussing, and that is Gabriel Jesus. Jesus has had a tough time at Arsenal. Injuries have affected him a lot since he joined from Manchester City. When he is fit and playing well, you can see exactly what he offers. He is clever, creative, works incredibly hard, and brings energy to the team. But staying fit has been the issue. Now his contract at Arsenal is running down. It expires at the end of next season. And from what is being reported, Arsenal are open to selling him this summer rather than letting the situation drag on and potentially losing him for free. If Jesus leaves, if that further justifies the push for Alvarez, you would essentially be replacing a striker who has struggled with fitness with one of the most informed centre forwards in European football right now. And if Gyökeres also needs to prove himself next season to earn his place, suddenly you have genuine competition for the striker role, which is exactly what top clubs need. Nobody should feel too comfortable. Everyone should be fighting for their position. Can you imagine the energy in training if Alvarez is at the club pushing for a starting spot? It would lift the whole squad. The money side of this deal and what it says about Arsenal. Let us be real about the financial side of this, because it is significant. If Arsenal pay 150 million euros for Alvarez, that is roughly 130 million pounds at current exchange rates. That is more than they have ever spent on a single player. It is more than Rice. It is more than any signing in the club's history. For some clubs, that kind of spending would be reckless. But for Arsenal right now, it tells a story about where the club is and where it wants to go. They are not a club that is happy finishing fourth or fifth and collecting Champions League money. They want to win the Premier League. They want to compete for the Champions League. They want to be mentioned alongside the best clubs in Europe, not just in England. And you cannot do that without investing. You cannot ask a manager like Arteta to compete with Manchester City, Chelsea, and Liverpool while working with a squad that has weaknesses. You have to back him. You have to give him the tools. Signing Julian Alvarez at 150 million euros says very loudly, we are serious. We are not pretending anymore. We are going for it. Do you think this kind of investment is what Arsenal need right now? Or is there a fear that putting so much money into one player could cause problems elsewhere? Now, for the other story, James Ellis has left Arsenal. While the Alvarez saga is the big flashy headline, there is a quieter story that also deserves your attention. James Ellis has left Arsenal. You might not know the name immediately, and that is okay because his role was largely behind the scenes. Ellis was Arsenal's technical director. He joined the club nearly 5 years ago, coming from Fulham, where he had been working as a senior scout. Over time, he rose through the club to eventually become technical director, a job he started just 7 months ago, and now he is gone. He announced his departure on LinkedIn in a genuinely warm and reflective statement. He talked about his 25 plus years in sport, from playing to being rejected, to coaching, to scouting, to senior leadership. He called sport a wonderful sector and said he was very lucky to have worked in it. About his time at Arsenal specifically, he wrote that in nearly 5 years, he gave everything he had in an attempt to help the club develop its high-performance environment. He said the most memorable part of his time there was coming across wonderful people who shared his values around opportunity and contribution, and he wished the club the very best for the future. There is nothing bitter in that statement, nothing that suggests a falling out or a dramatic exit. It reads like someone who is proud of what they did, grateful for the experience, and ready to move on to whatever comes next. But it still raises a question, does it not? Why leave now? Why 7 months into a new role at a club that is currently leading the Premier League? Why would you take on a new job title in June and then walk away in March of the following year? We do not have the full answer to that. These things are complicated. Sometimes a role does not turn out the way you expected. Sometimes the structure around you changes and the job becomes different from what was described to you. Sometimes people just know when it is time to move on. What we do know is that Ellis had a long and clearly meaningful career in football and that his contributions to Arsenal over nearly 5 years were genuine. He came in as a scout and left as a technical director, which is a serious progression and a reflection of how much he clearly grew within the organisation. What happens next for that role at Arsenal is something to watch. With Better Sporting Director already deeply involved in the recruitment and transfer strategy, the question of how they structure the technical side of the club going forward is an interesting one, putting both stories together and what they mean for Arsenal right now. When you step back and look at both of these stories together, what do you see? You see a football club in the middle of something significant, not a crisis, not a collapse, but a genuine moment of change and ambition. On the player side, Arsenal are preparing to make the biggest investment in their history to land one of the best young strikers in world football. They have the sporting director with the relationships to make it happen. They have the financial power to meet the asking price. And most importantly, they reportedly have the player on board. On the staff side, a technical director has just left after a short tenure. The behind the scenes structure of the club is shifting slightly. That is not always comfortable, but it is not necessarily a bad sign either. Clubs evolve, roles change, people move on. What matters is how the club handles the transition and makes sure the foundations are still strong. The thing that stands out most to me is the speed of the Alvarez situation, from being written off as having no chance in February to being reported as the clear favourites by late March. Arsenal have moved incredibly quickly. That is not ist auch ein accident. That is the result of relationships, smart work behind the scenes, and a clear strategy. Berta has clearly hit the ground running at this club. The move for Alvarez has his fingerprints all over it. And if it comes off, it will be remembered as one of the most important signings in Arsenal's modern history. One last question before we close here is something worth thinking about as you sit with all of this news. If Arsenal do sign Julian Alvarez for a record fee this summer, what do you expect from him in his first season? Do you think he will hit the ground running and immediately prove his worth? Or do you think he will need time to adjust, just like Gyökeres did? And if it turns out that Gyökeres was just getting started and suddenly finds his best form next season, is there a problem with having two expensive strikers competing for one spot? These are the kinds of questions that make following this club so exciting and sometimes so stressful. Nothing is ever simple with Arsenal, is it? Wrapping up. So here is where we are today as an Arsenal community. We are watching the club potentially prepare the biggest transfer in their history. We are watching a behind the scenes change that might reshape how they operate off the pitch. And we are doing it while sitting at the top of the Premier League, which is where this club deserves to be. If you are an Arsenal fan reading this right now, take a moment to appreciate that. This is not a club in crisis. This is not a club scrambling. This is a club with a plan, with leadership, with a manager who has built something real, and with an ownership group that is willing to back that ambition with serious money. The summer is coming. It could be one of the most important in recent memory. And if the Alvarez deal gets done, you will want to say you were following every twist of this story from the very beginning. That is what we are here for at Olivia's Sports Arsenal, to follow every twist, to break it all down, to ask the questions that matter, and to do it together as a community that genuinely loves this football club. Stay locked in. Things are just getting interesting. And as always, share your thoughts below. What do you think about the Alvarez pursuit? How do you feel about James Ellis leaving? Where do you see Arsenal going from here? We want to hear from you.